Yeah, so bore da I chi gyd. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many people here. We've had 50 people book on in total, which is a really good response, and we've got people from all corners of Wales, which is a great part of doing it online. We held a similar event in Swansea last November, very much a regional thing, and then the idea was that we would do one up in North East Wales this year, but obviously COVID has happened, so we haven't been able to do it physically, but obviously it's meant that we can cast the net wider, and we can now have all of you lovely people from all corners of Wales present. So we're hoping that it's still going to work out. The workshops, some of them are a little bit full, so may not be as much discussion perhaps as we hoped, but we really hope that you'll find it useful and inspiring, that will help you go back to your respective churches and denominations and take action. At the moment, I think all your microphones should be on mute. If they're not, please put them on mute now. We have started recording. If you wanted to turn your camera off at any point, please do that. Don't feel embarrassed. It's fine if you want to turn your camera off and just listen at any point. So without any further ado, I'm going to actually start on the presentation about Renew Wales, because I'm quite keen to keep to time. So, as I said, I'm Communications Officer with Renew Wales. Is it coming up as a screen? Can you see the screen? Yes. So Renew Wales is a programme which supports communities to take enterprising, self-directed action on sustainability and climate change. The programme was devised by a group of organisations with a history of working on low carbon and community development. So it's operated through DTA Wales and is funded by the Sustainable Steps programme, which is managed by the National Lottery Community Fund. I'm going to say about 2 or 3 sentences in Welsh as we go through the presentation, but for those of you who don't speak Welsh, don't worry, I am saying everything in English as well. So mae Adfywio Cymru yn dechrau o'r safbwynt bod pob cymuned, pob grŵp yn gallu gwneud cyfraniad sylweddol I daclo newid hinsawdd a creu dyfodol mwy canaliadwy. Efallai nad ydyn nhw'n ymwybodol o hynny. Ein nod ni yw tynnu allan ohonyn nhw beth all y cyfraniad hyn fod ac yna ei helpu I weithredu arno. So Renew Wales takes the view from the start that every community, every group can make a significant contribution to tackling climate change and creating a sustainable future, whether or not they know it. So our mission is to tease out of them what that contribution could be and help them start to act on it. We start by having a proper conversation about their work and about what matters to them, and about climate change and sustainability. And we facilitate an action planning process which helps them map out what steps they can take to act on those issues. Then we put them in touch with people who can help. So most importantly, we link them with people who we call peer mentors, people from other communities or groups who've already done something similar, so they can share their experience, their expertise, and their advice. The support is free to the group that receives it, but we pay those who provide it. It's because we know that grounded, practical advice specific to what each group is trying to do at the time when they need it is really valuable. Dyma rai o'r gwahanol mathau o grwpiau sydd wedi cymryd rhan. Prosiectau'n ymwneud ag egni, gwastraff, bwyd, trafnidiaeth, tir a bywyd natur. A falle bod rai o'ch chi'n meddwl dyw rheini ddim yn berthnasol I chi fel capeli neu eglwysi. Ond jyst I ni roi blas ar y math o grwpiau a prosiectau ni'n gweithio gyda nhw. Ac efallai fydd rhywbeth yn eich sbarduno I wneud rhywbeth yn eich cymuned hefyd. So here are some of the many types of groups who have got involved. Some to do with energy, some to do with waste, transport, nature, food. And whilst not all of these will be relevant to you as chapels and churches, hopefully it will just give you a taste of the groups that we work with and could actually inspire you to think about thinking a bit about outside the box and working more in a community. So there's been groups who fought to save local community assets because they've been important to their local well-being. Swim Narberth took over their local swimming pool and figured out that by generating their own renewable energy, they could become more sustainable, both financially and environmentally. Social enterprises who provide local services. So Clinview Care Farm in Pembrokeshire, they asked us about advice on how to run their care farm business in a way which better reflected their deep commitment to the land. So they went through the action plan and came up with lots of possibilities and ended up investing in an electric vehicle to reduce the carbon impact of the daily journeys that they have to take. We're involved with many youth groups, those who support young people to lead fulfilling and successful lives. Some of them set up schemes like this, restoring disused bikes, using reclaimed parts, skilling up young volunteers, and giving them then cheap, flexible, healthy means of transport. Another youth group, Digital Reveling Youth Club in Pontypridd, and this digital bench is now outside St Catherine's Church in Pontypridd. These young people decided that they wanted to do a solar power access phone charging point. So it's made out of recycled wood, which doubles up as a seat and even a sleeping place for the homeless. And the planters, with on either side of the bench, will be edible food, and they're fed by the water that's collected off the roof. Now, this has been a really groundbreaking project and had lots of attention from places all across Wales. And I think we've got another sort of replica, if I can call it that, happening down Carmarthen Way as we speak. We also work with groups who focus on personal well-being. So this is a community enterprise which helps people reconnect with nature and each other. So they're really good at doing that, but they wanted expert advice on how to draw up a sustainable management plan for their woodland so they could become good stewards of the natural space.
Del, sorry to interrupt. I don't think your slides we're still on slide 1, so I don't know whether we're viewing the presentation that you're going through or whether we're seeing a different screen. Sorry. Can you select if you're sort of showing the slideshow, are you able to switch your slide share screen to that view?
I am on share screen. I'm now on slide 11.
That's better for me. Thank you. Yeah, that works now.
That is it?
That's it now.
Okay, I don't know what I did. Sorry about that, everybody. I've just been showing pictures while I've been talking mainly and going through different photograph slides. So we'll just go back one. Incredible Edible was the group that was on there a minute ago, where quite literally, who are growing communities, they engage people around the issue of food. So if you eat, you're in, basically, as far as they're concerned. They're encouraging people to use public areas around them to grow food. So I could go on. There's hundreds of examples, but those are just a quick example of a snapshot of things that we do. 2 things to point out. Firstly is that the groups are doing what matters to them, where they are, and whether it's not the green thing that grabs them. Perhaps that isn't the reason why they wanted to act in the first place, but they realise that it generates benefits and impacts which go beyond the environmental impact. And secondly, it's people doing things largely under their own steam, drawing on resources that they've already got. Perhaps they may need permission or funding for a particular activity. And sometimes they may even be making a profit, but the important thing is that they're not just waiting for the powers that be to come along and do something with them or to them. So that's the important part for, as far as Renew Wales is concerned. Communities are taking action for themselves and we are helping them and supporting them to do that. So through our work, we're in contact with communities all over Wales who are already mobilised, already tackling sustainability and well-being. So just to close, there's 2 questions I wanted to pose at the start of today's events. 2 questions for you, really. The first is how you can all make use of what you already have, your assets, your buildings, your expertise, and also your experiences as people within a congregation. Congregations are made up of a huge variety of people who have experiences and skills. So what skills do you have? How can you make best use of them? What things can you start doing right now? Often some of them will be really simple steps. What can you do in the longer term? The second thing is, how can your experiences help support other people? How can you work together as chapels and churches, maybe in a geographical location? I know since the event in Swansea last year, there's been a cluster of chapels and churches in the Clydach area and the Sketty area, and I'm sure elsewhere, who have sort of kept in touch with each other and are now encouraging each other to do different things. So maybe you think on a geographical level, but also on a denominational level. Now, I know it's often divides between denominations for various reasons, but maybe this climate change could be an issue that brings people together so that the community can see that people are united, really. So that's the end of my really whistle-top presentation. So sorry about the slides not working. Literally, I've just had photographs of groups up there and it was just listening to my voice, but it probably would have helped understand what I was talking about. So yes, thank you for listening to that. Here's the contact details for us. We've got our website, our email address, our Twitter and our Facebook details there. As it is 22:10, I would like to hand straight over, according to the agenda, to Stuart Elliott from Llanberis. So A Rocha are the people who run the Eco Churches scheme, and they have various speakers across the country who they call upon now and again to come and speak at events, and Stuart is one of those. So I shall hand over to you, Stuart, and maybe you can explain a bit about your background and as you start, and then crack on with the Eco Church scheme. Thank you. Diolch.
Lovely, diolch yn fawr iawn, Dareth. Thank you very much. Croeso gyrus iawn I chi I gyd. Anyone welcome to this. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment, so bear with the technology beginning. I think that's the right button. So hopefully someone can acknowledge that they can see a picture of the A Rocha's website.
Yes.
Lovely, thank you for that. That's working lovely. So I'm Stuart Elliott. I live for the most part in Betws-y-Coed, where I work as vicar of local churches there, but we have our own family home in Llanberis, and that's the view you can see now of our garden looking down to Llanberis with a beautiful double rainbow. Incredibly special image to be able to capture on that particular day. I'm going to begin with a poem, because I think a lot of what we do needs a lot of inspiration, especially in these times. Per cael gipolwg yn unig ar y byd fel lle gorffwys, a fyddem wedi ein cyfartheddu gan y stori sanctaidd. If we had but a glimpse of the world as a resting place, would we be caught in the sacred story? Honoured as the world, the whole of life becomes a day of preparation. Might we then become co-creators of the dawn for a divine reimagining of the lost art and beauty of creation? A life laid fallow for a time is not in vain. To let go, to allow the natural restfulness to rise up, and with gentle ease to participate, earthed once again. So in terms of A Rocha, I don't know how many of you are aware of the organisation, so a few words on A Rocha itself. It began in 1983 in Portugal. A Rocha is Portuguese, it means the rock, and I guess in dual meaning, the rock as in the church built on St. Peter and the saints and all that followed him, but also the rock as in the earth we stand on. And A Rocha is primarily a conservation organisation and works around the world for conservation in many countries, running with partners and working alongside communities. In the UK particularly, it runs a number of projects, and one of those is the Eco Church project. So Eco Church is the second incarnation of that project. It is primarily just a survey, and it's a place to begin. It's a place to help you with your journey with the earth, with your local church, and it takes you on a huge tour of all manner of things that you might be able to do in your local community, with your church, campaigning, depending on how deep you want to go. It's been said to me that A Rocha's project, Eco Congregation and then Eco Church, is a little bit like a rabbit warren, a little bit like going down and finding yourself underground in a maze of tunnels, because there is such a lot of information, and you could end up being lost amongst it all. And so it's good to be able to offer a little bit of a guide to that this morning. For those of you who want it, I've produced a bilingual guide to Eco Church, and you're very welcome to be in touch with me to have a copy of that, either in paper form or electronically. It's a very basic guide, and it just takes you through the beginnings and gets you started, because as I've found, as someone who has gone through the process and had a church awarded, it can feel like you may end up drowning in the amount of information. The project itself has just been updated. We're really lucky, actually, that we're having this now, because the Eco Church format has literally, in the last month, been updated. So basically, it's a survey, and once you've logged in, you will be able to begin a survey, and you'll be able to be asked a huge number of questions. So if I'm just click on my survey, which I've just started this morning, and it will look like that when you begin. There are sections on worship and teaching in your church. What are your sermons about? What are the themes for each Sunday? Do you have Bible study groups that talk about environmental issues? Are the prayers about environmental issues? Do you bring that into your worship maybe once a year, maybe a few times a year, or is it something that's there all the time? And it asks those sorts of questions. With regard to the buildings, I can expect you imagine the sort of questions you'll be asked. Have you got insulation? Do you use a green tariff for your electricity and gas? And all manner of things around the building itself. If you've got land that belongs to your church or adjacent to it, it might be a churchyard. Do you manage that churchyard with the environment in mind? Are you in partnership with Caring for God's Acre, for example? Do you look after it and manage it sustainably? Is it open to visitors? Is there a wildflower meadow? All manner of questions regarding the land adjacent to the church. The community and global engagement section talks about how we link what we do locally to the world around us. Are we in connection with our MP? Do we lobby them? Do we ask those difficult questions of those in government and local community leaders to make the best use of resources? How are we engaged internationally? Do we support projects overseas? And lastly, the lifestyle section will ask us how we as a church community work ourselves in our own homes with our families for the environment and the questions around that. So once you've done all of those sections and answered those questions, it's pretty quick to go through, probably take you no more than 20 minutes. And very often you might find yourself answering, well, no. But actually, that's the point at which this project becomes really important, because once you've said, well, I'm not doing that, you've got a place to go, because there are resources there to help you. And we come along to the resource section. You can search for the resources now on the app from Eco Church. You can type in anything you like with regard to any of the things on the survey that you've come up against. And there are workshops, there are guides to insulation, as you see on the screen there. You can do all manner of different things. And it will give you a link or a file to download, which will take you through that process. One of the really good things to do at the beginning of this process, if you've never done it before, is to try and look at your church community's carbon footprint, because that will highlight for you quite a lot of the areas in which you might be able to do something environmentally and sustainably within your church community. Carbon 360 is a really, really good website to use, and it's relatively special, geared towards the church. So you just fill in the details of your local church, and as you can see on the screen, this one I've set up for this past year, the year before, 2019. So it's good to go back a year really and get a benchmark of what you've done, if you can do that. So how many people on a Sunday, how long is the building used for, how many services do you have a year, and it will work out your carbon footprint. And there's all manner of different sections on energy use, on travel and transport. Do your congregation and staff share cars? Do they walk? Do they all drive to church and park in the enormous car park like there is here in Betws-y-Coed? What about food? What do you serve? Is it fair trade? What about things you eat? It's really quite in depth. And don't forget, this is just for the church. You can do this individually as well if you would like to, within the lifestyle section. Where do you put your money? How much do you spend? Where does that go? Where does that come from? And all of these things add up to the carbon footprint that we all share on this earth. What about waste and water? How much do you use? Where does it go? Do you recycle? Does it go to landfill? What about water bills? Are you on a water meter? So that's the footprint. That's just one of the many resources that the Eco Church project links to. The big thing to say, I think, here is that Eco Church doesn't do all of the things itself. It's a resource. It's a place where all those resources are pulled together, and you can draw out of that wherever you are on your journey with this. It starts where you are. That's why the survey is a brilliant place to begin. It's a benchmark of where you are. You can find out exactly how your church is doing, and you can start from where your congregation, your people are, and hopefully you can do something to safeguard God's good earth, this planet that we all share. I think I've got about a minute left. I'm going to share something I wrote for the Bangor Diocese just in this last few moments. It's called What If, and it's based on the Rob Hopkins book, which is From What Is to What If, as he looks about a new way of being in our current environment. So what if the Bangor Diocese turned out okay? What if the local minister was embedded in the community as a warden of a sheltered housing initiative with a local cafe and bakery out of what was still the church building, but now offers something for the whole of life? What if the produce for that cafe was grown locally by a food co-op? What if the energy came from the solar panels on the south-facing roof, from the crowd-funded tidal energy project? What if there was an integrated public transport system that the local people had asked and campaigned for? What if diocesan meetings were scheduled to happen at times that integrated with buses and trains? What if worship happened naturally, in tune with the seasons and in appropriate settings? What if Christians gathered in each other's homes where there was not a church building, and for those unable to travel, they connected by the digital network? What if the churchyard gravestones had been moved to one side and fruit and nut trees were planted, each one giving a living memory to those departed, giving life once again? What if the church festivals were true feast days, offering not light relief from the daily grind or hope in the face of a desperate future, but joyful celebrations that God's world is abundant with life?
Fantastic, Stuart. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. I'm sure we, well, really impressed with that poem. I'd like to have a copy of that, please. Maybe we can send that around. Thank you for setting the challenge.
No.
Thank you for setting the challenge for us all and explaining, you know, how you get through the process, because I think it can be daunting for a lot of people at the start of the process. And the whole point of this event is that, you know, through the support available via Renew Wales and introducing them to the Eco Church, that people can actually start taking little baby steps possibly. So thank you very much for that. Just before we move on to the 2 case studies, I should have asked at the beginning, we've got a few people who haven't told us which workshops they want to be in. So if I call out your name, could you put the workshop choices in the chat? If you notice the chat down the bottom of your screen, you should have a little chat icon. So Jonathan Benjamin Thomas, Angela Gerard, Oriel Price, Clive Hughes, Christine Link, Anne Williams, Sandra Ward, and John Roberts. I'm not even sure if all of you were there. If any of you were there, please indicate during the next section in the chat which workshops you would like to go to, and Matt will then hopefully put you in the right room.
There was a question in the chat. Do we have time to put that to Stuart, or do we do that another time?
If Stuart would like to answer it, he could, yes. Have you seen the question in the chat? It's how does Eco Church link with Eco Schools?
I've just replied to that privately to John, but for the benefit of everyone else, the Eco Schools programme is a completely separate programme. It's not run by A Rocha. However, if you have church schools or local community schools who are engaged in that, you will find that the 2 programmes overlap in many, many areas. As you go through your survey, the connection with the local community section will certainly be relevant in terms of, are you talking to schools and community groups about environmental issues? And if the local church and local school are both running the Eco programme, then you're going to find a lot of common ground with that.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. Yeah, there are lots of schemes often running side by side, but I know in the workshop that I'm running later on, I am mentioning engagement with schools, so that ties in nicely with that. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to call on Marion Hughes now, who's from St Asaph Parish Church. She's going to speak to us for about 10 minutes. Going to explain some of the action that they have already taken as a church. They've been supported through Renew Wales for the past year or so, maybe. So the whole point of this section is that we're giving you some real life experiences and some inspiration of churches around Wales that have already taken action. So over to you, Marion, please.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Right. Let me just go back to... Oh, we did this before, didn't we? And it was fine.
Yes.
Can you see my screen now?
Can anybody see her screen? I can't.
No? Okay, so let's...
Oh, someone can. Sandra can.
Hang on a minute. Now you can, yes?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Right, well, mae'n ddrwg gen I, ond rhaid I mi siarad yn Saesneg. Dwi ddim yn medru siarad digon o Gymraeg. And I'm told I speak Welsh with a Tunbridge Wells accent, so apologies for that. We, some 3 or 4 years ago, started to think about our church, which was in a parlour state. It was a sort of place where you see your breath in winter. And it really was very cold. However, early you got up to put the heating on. And the floor was broken, it was uneven, and yet we wanted to reach out to our community. We were involved with people living with dementia and also young children. And the multiple floor levels were a complete hazard. And the broken stonework and so on, and where it was a wooden floor, that was rotting in places. So I've painted a dire picture because that's how it was. And we started to think about reordering. Basically, it ended up with a major restructuring program. And early on, we were extremely fortunate in, through a serendipitous route, while inquiring about solar panels, meeting you in Renew Wales. And we found that we were allowed, as Delyth has said, to have access to a mentor. And I've already mentioned that heating was quite a big issue for us. So we've a delightful gentleman called Peter Draper came up from Cardiff and assessed the building, and we wanted it to be as energy efficient as possible. So he started looking at the building, the roots of heat loss, and he helped us to consider a way forward. And that really was invaluable. We initially thought about going completely green and having a ground loop system with a heat pump, but that wasn't possible because the length of the loop and the roots would take us to a churchyard with graves, and clearly that was a non-starter. As well as that, it needed a dedicated plant room. So not to be upset, we said, okay, let's have a borehole. We know it's expensive, but then we found it would have gone below the level of the local water table because the river is just a field and a road away. Air source pumps were considered, but we had heard that they were noisy, so we actually then decided that really wasn't going to help us. Photovoltaic cells, I'll come back to. We certainly could fit those. We are, as you saw, a double nave church, and they could be fitted in the valley, but that's when we get the money. So we have mains gas on site, and that became our preferred energy supply. This is what we used to look like. So you can see double nave, and it was like having two different churches because the pews had been taken out of one side, and there were just so many different levels. It was crazy. The lighting wasn't very good. It was always a bit gloomy in there. And what Peter said was, when you're thinking about energy conservation and improving your energy efficiency, you have to start with the fabric of the building. The walls you can't do much about. The windows, you're not allowed to put secondary glazing in. And so really it's roof, floor and boilers. So we started with the floor. And it was a little traumatic, I think, if most of the congregation had seen that. They'd have been a tad upset. But this is what we've ended up with, which I think you'll agree is stunningly and beautifully different. It's well lit, and I'll explain to you how we got there. We were fortunate in obtaining £426,000 before we started through grant monies, mainly through the Welsh Government Community Facilities budget. And although we're not quite sure yet, we haven't quite finished because of COVID, we believe that we will come in well within budget, which will help towards the roof when we eventually get round to that. So we'll start in our presentation with the floor. As you're aware, everything you do in a listed building, and we're grade 2 star listed, must be technically reversible. So the first thing, as we realized our previous floor had just been built on mud, on soil, and a few graves, the first thing to put down was a damp-proof membrane. I can't comment on the gauge, so please don't ask me. And then on top of that went a huge wodge of rigid foam insulation. And then, in order to make it reversible, 3 whole kilometres of lightweight water piping. And Peter had recommended zoning that. But in addition to that, we had 3 critically placed wall heaters. The water pipes were held in place by screed, and you can see them here. In fact, Peter has suggested doubling them up and making them close together by the windows. And you may just be able to see that it looks as though some of them are closer together along the walls. And that was topped by that beautiful solid oak floor. So we are truly blessed. The idea for the gas boilers came from a visit we did to Knutsford, where they chose not to have a big commercial boiler, but in fact 2 domestic boilers that work in tandem. And it's a bit of a business continuity plan, so that if one does fail in the middle of winter, we do have some heat that we can supply to the congregation or to the community, whoever's using it, in the interim. We were concerned about how our internal restructure might actually affect heating. And we were worried that the draft from and downdraft from the windows on the balcony or the mezzanine might actually then overflow the edge down onto people below. And so that's been mediated by both glass to the height of the balustrade in front of the windows, and also by supplementary wall radiators up there. We used to have hideously inefficient and grossly expensive halogen lighting, which never quite cut the mustard. Now we have LED lighting, which is in zoned areas. I think there's 6 zoned areas.
Right.
And each of them have dimmers and timers. So that allows for flexibility if we want a performance, or if you want to highlight the font area for a baptism, and so on. And we've been able to realize proper draft proofing now. The doors were so wonky before, they've now been straightened and the floor raised, and we have proper draft excluders. And in addition, at the entrance, we now have an entrance porch, which is much bigger, with a radiator in, and doors on the inside as well as the outside. And that has been replicated in another Victorian porch on the side. So that is now a closed area. So we've worked hard to minimize drafts. When Peter worked out the energy transfer and any potential loss of energy, he said that by putting in new boilers compared to what we had, that should save us 25% of our expenditure and our energy usage just with that one action. The floor, he said, the heat loss by insulating that would reduce from something like 50, I think they're watts, to 30. So not a big improvement. And the big saving would be if we could insulate the roof. That would realize a saving of 224 watts down to 64. So that's really a project for the future. As well as wanting to reduce our carbon footprint overall with the new building, because it would be open more and we didn't want the cost to rise exponentially of running it, we were very concerned about equality and safety, because the whole ethos of this was to open out the church for community use and to make it a community hub when it wasn't being used as a church. And so we now have an easy access loo, and inside that there's a baby changing station, or nappy changing station, I should say. But my big joy is the level floor throughout. Not only is it a level floor, so easier to get around for anyone with a wheelchair or any kind of disability, but it sort of unified both naves into a single building. We have considered a stair lift to get up to the mezzanine. That can be retrofitted. So we are waiting to see how the building is used as to whether we will actually need to do that. Otherwise, everywhere else is accessible with handrails and ramps. You can see the ramp onto the churchyard lawn, which is beloved by those who mow the grass, because you can now drive the tractor mower up without risk of tipping. But interesting points, we obviously now have chairs instead of pews. But before we changed them, we thought, well, people used to pull themselves up. We have an elderly congregation, like most places. They used to pull themselves up with the pews. So we've realized we need a number of chairs with armrests so that people can push rather than pull themselves up to standing when they need to. We are registered as a dementia-friendly church, and I was very pleased that we could change the colour of our mats by the door to a lighter colour, because many of you will be aware that if you have dementia, some people perceive a black doormat as a hole, and are therefore afraid to come in. So I'm really pleased that with the improved lighting and with the mats, we achieved 2 of our objectives to move on to our next stage of being dementia friendly.
Marianne?
Yeah.
We just need to move you on a bit quicker. Sorry if you don't mind. We need to fit in.
I'm very nearly there. These are the things that we want to do in phase 2. We haven't ruled out photovoltaic cells, but that's going to have to be an external project with a new source of external funding. And yes, we do want to do wonderful things. I'm glad to hear about God's Acre. We'll look at that for regenerating our churchyard. And as I said, really, that is the purpose of the building. As soon as we can open, when COVID allows, we will be trying to fulfill our targets for Welsh governments, but very much as a church to reach out to our community, to serve them better and to build some resilience within our community, which is still suffering from the floods way back a number of years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. There's plenty to think about there. I'm sure everybody can identify nearly every chapel and church suffers with energy issues and cold, I'm sure. So, but giving us a lot of other things to think about. I didn't know about the dementia thing and a black hole, so that's educated me on that. So thank you very much for that, and it's really good to see such excellent action being taken and really a lot being achieved. So well done to all of you in the congregation for that. I'm going to hand over to Noel Isherwood now from St Paul's Church in Sketty. Yeah, he's going to take us through the action that they have taken here in Swansea. Thanks, Noel.
Okay, can people hear me and see me? See the slide presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you. And hear you. Okay,
well, I'm going to just take you on a little brief, the journey that we've been on. We haven't done such a big project as St Asaph, but we have begun the process of moving towards a greener carbon footprint by the actions that have happened over the last 2 years since Renew Wales got involved with us as a church. So let's go through this. I'm an architect, by the way, and I have a practice in Swansea. So as a member of the PCC as well at St Paul's, I'm often called on to look at building issues. But it sort of morphed and it became more important that we were looking at the ecological footprint of the whole site, and that became more important than fixing radiators for the time being anyway. So it started off with a slide presentation that was sent to us from the church in Wales to remind us about Eco Church program that A Rocha had going for a while, and would we like to get on it? It was sent to me, and I just started to pull together a little group, and we started talking about it. We looked at the survey, we did the survey, and with everything that we had going on at the time, moving in that direction, eventually with some adjustments, we were able to get our bronze award, which seemed to motivate quite a lot of people to get going. And that was again, just these little milestones are quite important when you're going for the, if you go for the end, what's going to happen at the end, like 2 or 5 years down the road, it can be very daunting. But if you just start off with the small things, that seemed to be quite good. So we've got the list of all of the elements there of the survey on the left-hand side. That's St Paul's from the inside. It's quite a nice Victorian church, and we have the benefit of having a parish centre that was built in the sort of early, I think during the 80s, which is very comfortable and enables us to do a lot of things that you can't do if you only have the old church building to deal with. So it does get cold. We do have those issues. We don't have any insulation, but we are dealing with that as we go along. This is the 3 ministry areas now combined with St Paul's Sketty in the red line just over towards the right-hand side. That's the position of St Paul's Sketty, and as you know, if you in an Anglican church or a church in Wales, you'll know that the orientation is always north-south. This is quite a useful thing if you are thinking of photovoltaic panels, because you always know that one side at least is facing pure south, and that's the case here. And we have the Singleton Park and the university just a bit further down. Those are the buildings. You see the vicarage over on the left-hand side, which doesn't have that orientation. You've got the parish centre in the centre, and the church building. And we did think about putting photovoltaic panels on the church roof, but we knew there was probably a lot of issues relating to the CADU listing, and we thought, well, it would be easier just to start off with the parish centre, which didn't have that problem. That's a picture of the church there. That's again the historic sort of plan there, and you can see how many sort of small farmsteads and green there would have been around Sketty, and how local people were producing foods and local produce. This is just a slide I sometimes put in to get an idea of how important the church is in the way in which settlements have grown and developed, and how much there has been a relationship between quite high levels of, quite dense building, whether it's the church, the monastery, the associated settlement, but also enclosing a lot of growing areas and places where production and food is done to support the ministry. We started off just a bit randomly on our own sort of ideas to begin with, on something we call the 4 capitals, which was looking at how capital accrues not only financially, as a lot of accountants seem to think, but it covers natural, social, and the built environment as well, which is quite good when you're dealing with various types of people who are coming at the project from many different areas. So it opens up the whole thing of value and what really is valuable. Is it social, natural, built, and financial? We looked at all those. Oops, sorry, I think I've gone backwards. Yeah, we go on. So here you can see some of the things that under those headings we started to look at under built capital. We look at the remodelling of the nave of St. Paul's to meet future needs, much as at St. Asaph. And probably about 20 years ago, there was a very big, expensive scheme put together for St. Paul's, which would have included a lot of interventions and galleries. But with the new austerity era, this has gone way on the back burner, and other things have become much more important, like looking at the ecological footprint, engaging local people, connecting, making the connections that are already there stronger. So this was our first attempt to quantify what the social and economic capital were of our assets. This is Delyth. She came into the picture at this quite early stage with Renew Wales action plan, just to complicate our lives a bit more. But it was quite handy to have her sort of simplifying it all for us. And we started, there's of course the brief description of our project, looking holistically at environmental sustainability issues within the church under the 5 categories of the Eco Church scheme. So this was very helpful in focusing our attention. And again, we're looking at the building fabric, what we can and can't do. And as the first mentor came along to us, we had Peter Draper also just giving us some guidance on different approaches to the energy and the heating. There we are, report for St. Paul's Eco Church project. And he again looked at the various heating requirements that we had to deal with, and where we have issues with the boilers which are sized for the radiators in the church rather than for the actual entire sort of heating output that the church requires. So we can never really get up to any level of heating comfort. We did experiment last year with the idea that we could have the heating on kind of all the time at a low level, just to warm the structures up a bit in the. This did turn out to be quite an expensive exercise. So the accountants accountants tended to say, well, we can't do that. But I'm not quite convinced about that. We'll continue to look at it. We've come up with some other ideas recently. We looked at a lot of different pew heaters and all the other kinds of heating. At this point also, we got in touch through a Renew Wales event with Egni Co-op, who enabled us to look at the idea that we could raise funding for photovoltaic panels, and also get a feed-in tariff, which at the time was going, which was a possibility. So we applied for that. We did all the calculations with our existing heating. We got some quotations in. We got one here for £11,000. And this was going to put some photovoltaic panels on one of the facets of the church, the parish centre, which has got like a pyramid. So one side of that faces south. So we filled the whole of that, or we thought we were doing that, but we realised we could actually fit on more than we first anticipated. You can see there we were looking at something like about 10, I think it was 10,000 watts, is it, kilowatts. We looked at it again and we found out that by putting an extra row of photovoltaic panels, we could bump it up to 12,000 kilowatts per annum. And of course, the cost goes up a little bit, but then you realize at the bottom of that list there, you can see the amount of financial benefit we get increases year by year, and as electricity energy prices go up over the next few years, so of course this is all in stacks up in our favor. There you can see before and after. That's before, just literally just the day COVID started and the lockdown, we had to abandon the scaffolding and just leave it for a few months. And then when things relaxed a little bit, we managed to just get the photovoltaic panels, and it's all hitched up and all working. Of course, we can't really test anything at the moment because there's nobody using the building to really be able to do the tests that we wanted to do. So that's going to be something to come a little bit later. One of the things we did discover, though, is that we would have quite a bit of surplus energy. A lot of it will go back to the grid. But if we want to make direct use of the energy, we can make a feed that goes direct to the boilers in the main church, and we will be able to get a much more efficient use of the energy that comes through the photovoltaic panels by going direct rather than going through the grid. So this is another little project that we're going to do when we can, that will enable us to have the boilers on for much longer periods of time without costing us an arm and a leg. The Scouts have a hut on the site, and they're very much part of how we think about the future of the site. At this point, we have mentor number 2. We were lucky to have two mentors on this scheme, and we have Neil Barry, who's into all things green, horticulturalist, originally from Kew Gardens, and he looked at a number of things for us on the site there. He looked at how certain areas, number 1, had very diverse habitat already, so don't mow it and add a bug hotel and just keep it like it is. Number 2, we had a cemetery, continue the maintenance, but add an advertising board to get more volunteers for all the other projects you want to go where it's public. Number 4, growing potential, community garden or an orchard or wildflower meadow. And number 5, that we have a sort of flooding, sort of wet area where we could add willow and coppice and water plants and increase the biodiversity that way. So this is kind of the way he put it to us. And at the same time, we then got linked to Social Farms and Gardens through Neil, and we discovered that we could get a grant to cover the idea of putting in an orchard, because the orchard became a big idea for the Welsh Government. So there's quite a bit of money for orchards. So this is a project that has come from this. And also we're fortunate enough to also get the funding for the photovoltaic panels covered by the same grant. So having decided to purchase the photovoltaic panels instead of entering into a lease, where we get a higher rate from the grid for our electricity, but it also means that so we make more money as a church from investing in it rather than for leasing it out in the long term. So these things are things we've learned as we've gone along. We're now looking at the orchard project, which is sort of helping us to decide what kind of fruit trees and what we're going to plant. So obviously there's a great deal of publicity around how the well-being of local communities can be affected by having green things within the church that people can identify with and participate in. And so this is good. We probably would have done something like this in figuring out how to work out the master plan had we been able to meet in a hall and talk to each other. So what we're tending to do at the moment is just pick a good day and do everything outside. So we kind of sometimes taking advantage of the fact everybody's together after a church service and moving them around into the orchard areas or into the rest of the churchyard and looking around, talking, finding out how we're going to do things rather than having formal meetings. And then the rest, of course, is done on Zoom, just as we're doing now. And this was just over the weekend. We're staking out the area that we finally discovered is the right place to put the orchard. This was an original plan here for to get things moving, and I think it's always important to have an agenda for any meeting, especially now that we're all so diverse. But also, I found that having a drawing on something, even if your drawing is wrong, like this one is quite wrong because I put the orchard in the wrong place, but it very quickly got everybody's reactions, and I was able to then work out what we really had to do. So never be afraid to do a wrong drawing, because I mean it's a very good way to get to the bottom line quickly. This after everybody had reacted, we did some actual measurements on site, and now we know exactly where the orchard is going within the course of the weekend. So we're now just compiling the list of types of fruit that we want. The vicar and one or two people do not want apples at any cost. They're seen as potential missiles, and the reason for this is that despite being a rather leafy suburb of Swansea, this is actually quite a sort of hotbed for drug dealing, and at weekends and during the week, we've had a big problem, and the vicar and his wife have been accosted twice during the course of this year by drug dealers using the car park and then the rest of the. So I understand where he's coming from. So now we're looking at a lot of softer fruit. We're looking at plums. We're looking at green gages. We're looking at crab apples. We've got a lot of things that we can still choose from. And eventually we'll get to this, and hopefully we'll have a lot of community involvement. I think it's on November the 31st. I think is International Tree Planting Day. So we're going to see if we can organise our tree planting activities for that day, so bring in as much of the community as we can. And really, I think what I'm finding is this orchard project is a really good opportunity to bring the community on something. Photovoltaics are a little bit cold and a little bit distant and a little bit technical, but fruit and vegetables and activity and pruning and all of that kind of stuff, weeding is all part of what is very easy access, particularly as we've got a school right on our doorstep. And with COVID and lockdown, there's very few places for schools to take their children to go to, and they can't always be in the classroom for everything. They've got nowhere to go outside. So I think that there's a great opportunity for churches to offer opportunities for schools to come and do something that will help them with their education in natural things. So that's it from me, really. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noel. Again, really interesting to hear how different churches are going at it. Obviously a common theme of energy as well, but useful to see how you're tackling the land outside. Lots of churches will have land. I think the key thing from there was setting milestones and taking small steps, isn't it? I think a lot of churches may be feeling daunted that they've got such a huge task ahead of them, but taking small steps is really key to that. And also I found what's useful from both the speakers is how you've pointed out some things that, you know, haven't worked so well, but things that you can't do as well. I think it's important that we learn from things that don't go so well. And it's important that people will share those experiences and learn from that. So thank you to both the speakers, and again, thank you to Stuart. We are running a little bit behind time according to the agenda that we set out. I'm a little bit loath to cut the workshop time because I think that's the key part where a lot of us will get, well, a lot of you will get the opportunity to say something. So I guess it may be the break that gets cut from quarter of an hour to a quick 5-10 minutes for a quick nip to the toilet or a cup of coffee or something. So if everybody's happy with that, we will go ahead now into the first lot of discussion workshops. So for those of you who haven't been on these before, Matt, do you want to start sort of pinging people some messages? What's going to happen is a little message should come up on your screen asking you to go to, you know, room 1 or room 2 or whatever it is, just like the doctor's surgery. So click on that, click on the button when you get prompted, and then you should disappear off into a virtual room somewhere with other people who will partake in your workshop. And if we do that for, what is it now, 10:30? Yeah, I think we do need to keep to half an hour. If we can finish that at 11, and then we'll have a 5-minute break if people are okay with that. Does that roughly seem okay to people? Yeah, okay. Lovely, thank you. Matt is going to start.
Yeah, I'll open all the rooms now. If anyone finds themselves in the room they weren't expecting to be in, or the session they weren't expecting to be in, feel free to, there'll be a button to come back out to this main section and we can put you in the right one. So
That is going to stay in that main section in case there's
yeah,
a...
it'll be here.
So, yes.
Okay, here we go.
Hello. Hello.
Gosh, that happened quicker than I thought. This is going to be a very large workshop, which is making me rethink a little bit on how I was going to do it. I'll wait until I think we're all in. Oh, we could all be in, right, okay. Literally what I had planned to do, I really want your input on this. According to the notes and the resources, like Stuart pointed out at the beginning on the A Rocha website, this section on global and community engagement has got 4 or 5 other sections within it. So I was just going to go through each of those in turn, a few little sentences and examples of things that have been done. And then I wanted, after each section, for you to all say, you know, if you had any experiences of that topic, and for you all to chat amongst yourselves. Now that there's so many of us, I'm not sure how that is going to work. So what I'll do, I'll just read out the topics quickly. And if there's anything, if a few of you want to jump, we don't have to do it in order. We can just jump straight to whichever is the most sort of popular topic. Does that sound okay? Right, so one is why engage with the community in the first place. The second one was how to engage with your local MP, member of the Senedd and local councillor. Then there was a bit about global campaigns and the resources and different reasons for joining global campaigns. The fourth one was how to engage with local sustainability groups. The fifth one was how to engage your school on environmental issues. The sixth one was how to twin your church. And I knew I wasn't going to get around to the seventh one, which was an overview of A Rocha's projects. So we've got twin churching, engaging with schools, engaging with local sustainability groups, global campaign issues, engaging with politicians, and why engage. Anybody got any strong preference for hearing any of those first, or should I just crack on and try and speak really quickly about what I wanted to say and open it up to you? Yeah? Okay.
Crack on.
I'll be talking very quickly, but I'm reading a lot of it as well. So yeah, I'll crack on quickly, but please, you know, I'm trying to keep an eye on you all as well, but if you want to say something and interrupt, by all means, you know, put your hand up and jump in. So why engage with the community is probably something we sort of all know already. Becoming an eco-church is more than just looking after the building in an environmentally friendly way. Obviously, that's a key part of the process. But the journey affects every aspect of your church life and every area of church lives, including how we communicate with the wider world. So it's more of a holistic mission. So basically, it's about us making our actions and our lives speak louder than just our words. So people will perhaps wonder why we're looking after the creation and doing things in the community. There's an example of one church in Estonia. They found out that local people responded to environmental action. The church sent a team to tidy up a wasteland by a bus stop and plant flowers there. And the impact that had, according to a quote from them, was amazing. Something similar happened in Russia near the border with Chechnya. The congregation was sent to do some cleaning in their town. There wasn't much public money for that. And so people started noticing that something was going on. In fact, their pastor said this was the only time when it wasn't us trying to stop people and talk to them about spiritual matters. It was other people stopping us and saying, why are you doing this? And then it spoke more about words than salvation. And it showed that our lives speak louder than our words or tracts. So the action of that church, of both of those, one in Estonia, one in Russia, and again, I'm sure it's happening all over the UK and all over Wales, can often speak louder than us trying to sort of convert people. It is the right thing to do, and it can have a snowball effect. Again, there was a church in Chelsea where they did some work in the communities, very densely populated area with very little green space, lots of traffic, obviously, and very bad air quality. So they were generally aware of the environmental challenges facing them and wanted to think about them and take steps to make a difference. So they set up a sustainability group to work on them. They realized that it was the motivation that it was the right thing to do. So they found that having enjoyable, doable events with an environmental theme is a helpful way to reach people and bring people who wouldn't normally be interested in traditional church activities to come in. And now they feel that their church is an oasis in an urban environment. I am going to leave it there actually, because that is enough. Does anybody got any comments on sort of why we should engage with the community? Anybody got anything to add to that? Any experiences that you've already done in your community? No? Oh, he's very quiet. I think the key thing is sharing the part of the eco journey with the community, part of the engagement, telling people what the struggles are as well as the successes. And it's part of a holistic mission. You can communicate with your community in a variety of different ways. Emails, obviously lots of people make use of social media these days, internet. I would say face-to-face contact and physical meeting. We'll sort of see how that develops over the next coming months. Obviously there's limitations on that, but the one thing is also key is word of mouth. Conversations with friends and neighbours and colleagues can often be a lot more important than we realise. The second title, little subgroup, is about how to engage with local politicians. Anybody keen for me to do that now? I sort of feel that could be further down the list, or do you feel it wants to be dealt with now? Yeah. Okay, I'll do it. Yeah, it's all about sort of making people a bit more accountable and realising that perhaps they don't know what goes on. So whoever you are, wherever you are, you can engage with your MP or your local authority councillor or your member of the National Assembly, the Senedd. And lobbying is a way to do that. You can either do that individually or as part of a group or collectively as a church. It can be very simple. It is a simple, but can be a very effective way. So just some examples of that. I'm sure you've all seen on the news over the past year, the, oh my gosh, gone blank. The, oh, what are they called? The campaigners who've been taken over, sitting in the streets and things.
Extinction Rebellion.
Guerrilla gardeners.
Yes. There's an example here when People Power filled the streets of London. So 9,000 citizens came from across the UK to speak about what they loved. This wasn't the Extinction Rebellion. This was Climate Coalition, Speak Up. So there were beekeepers, surfers, snowboarders and nuns. People were saying their message loud and clear. And there were people from Tearfund, Christian Aid and Ar Rocha all in that campaign as well. And there's a quote here from the World Wildlife Fund. One of their communications people were part of that and was describing the colourful sight and greeted people. Conversations were taking place outside between all these, you know, random strange people, if you like, and their elected representatives. So a lot of the MPs came out to speak to them. And he said, "We've lit a small fire which has just blazed all over the place." And I think that was sort of seeing how random people like surfers and nuns were united in the cause of doing something for the environment, and it made the MPs and the political people there think, whoa, what's going on? How can we have surfers and nuns under the same banner talking to us? So the other issue is, another option is to invite your elected representatives to your church. I don't know, possibly something that many of us have never done and never really thought about. Why not invite them to come to mark the start of your eco-church journey? If you decide after this event or the next coming months that you're going to embark on that eco-church scheme or do something, why not invite your local political representatives to come and start that journey with you, and then invite them back when you win your award, she says, speaking positively. Keep them in touch. They can see what's going on. It's good for them to be involved and see what's happening there. There was an example here of Trinity Methodist Church in Kirkby and Ashfield. Their MP came to present them with their second Eco Church Award. And she was blown away by the amount of community groups that we use in the church. She was totally unaware of that. And she realised that there were more than 100 meals were being served in their cafe each week for less advantaged people, and that it was all sort of locally sourced food. So her eyes were really opened by visiting there. And equally then, going to visit your MPs in their local surgeries. If it's something you don't feel you want to do as an individual, again, go as a group from your church maybe, make an appointment during their surgeries, speak to them, tell them what the issues are that you care about. They are representing you. And if they can't represent the way that we feel, if they don't know what the issues are. So it's sort of taking a stand, deciding that you will go and see them, making clear points, knowing exactly what you're going to say in a concise way, and possibly then just letting them know that there are at least you lot as a little group of people in their area who are really concerned about climate change and sustainability. And it puts them on, it gives them a bit of pressure and a bit of a mandate to work from. We've heard, we've been working with Gwynedd Council over the last 2 years, drawing together with climate and environmental organisations, and the councillors were saying to us, we need more of a mandate from the people, that they want us to do this kind of thing and they want us to take action. So if that is replicated all across Wales, then, you know, getting in touch with both your local councillors and the Assembly in Cardiff and MPs is a way to go. So state your opinion clearly, tell them what the issues are, and then sort of set a bit of a challenge as to what are they going to do about it. Anybody had any experience of their local politicians, or any of them involved in your churches, or you sort of contacted them already? Has that happened?
Yeah, I just put in the chat that we've had all of our MP, MS and local council along, and we meet in a community centre, so our stuff is relatively low-key, but we're starting to pick up stuff around the environment and so on. And they've all been really interested, they've all been really supportive, they're dead keen to come along. Like I said, you know, a bit cynically, it's a good photo op for them, but, you know, jump on the opportunity.
Yes, definitely, definitely. John, I think you said something there, but your microphone isn't on, so we didn't hear you.
How's that?
Well, right now we can hear you, yes.
You can hear me. Yeah, I made an approach to our local MP a year or two ago about nuclear energy, and my personal views on that, and found we came to a situation where we had to agree to disagree. So I don't think necessarily you can always look to them to be totally supportive of what you're thinking about or where you're moving to.
So that's a fair point, yeah. I think it's sort of making them aware that there are people there who are passionate, and, you know, agreeing to disagree is still an agreement in it, and the discussion has happened. That's the important thing. It's the engagement is the key thing here, and sort of making connections, really. So yeah. Anybody else? Anything?
Yes, we have a local community group which involves the church and the community, and we've involved the council in various activities. Yeah, so it's positive.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. The next little section is all about global stuff, and that's the interesting thing about both sustainability and the climate change as a concept, is the duality of doing stuff on a local basis in your immediate vicinity, and then the global issue. And I think, generally speaking, what's put a lot of people off in the past is that it's always been seen as a problem that's somewhere else. The images that were been shown for the last decade have been of polar bears and ice caps. Well, that isn't hugely relevant to us in Wales. We don't have ice caps, we don't have polar bears. And even though people are sad about it, it's an issue that's affecting people thousands of miles away. And, you know, droughts that happen in Africa or something, yes, that's elsewhere. That's not us, thank you very much. However, I think, you know, in terms of global campaigns, and as I guess more as Christians and churchgoers, is that perhaps we're a bit more aware of global issues and a bit more aware of the link and how important they are, and probably already taking part in a lot of these things. Some of these issues I'm sure you will already be familiar with. I'm sure you all sort of support various charities and campaigns for famines and droughts and floodings and earthquakes and stuff that happens. Often the church community that mobilises those and the Christian charities that are at the forefront of that. Again, it's about campaigning, is to put pressure on decision makers to make sure that they are making the right decisions for the future of the planet. So Christian Aid, especially, and their partners have been campaigning on climate change specifically since 2006. If you think, gosh, that's been a long time already, and why is it still, you know, not a lot of action on such a big issue? So they say, as Christians, we're called to love our neighbours. If our neighbours are suffering the effects of climate change, then we can demonstrate that love by making choices to live our lives more sustainably and campaigning for our politicians to take action. Then there's another quote which actually really drove it home to me. I think it was something that I thought I was aware of, but when I heard this, I just thought, okay. Project manager with Practical Action Bangladesh says, forget about making poverty history, which has been Christian Aid's strapline and other groups for such a long time. Forget about making poverty history. Climate change will make poverty permanent. When I read that, I sort of thought, you know, that is such a big statement, isn't it? And it then makes us think that the campaigning needs to continue. We really have to strive to try and do something about this. So some people will think that they can fly less or consume less and consume only fair trade products. Others will choose to use renewable energy in their homes or invest in their savings in an ethical way. But we need to be sort of up in that game a bit and campaigning for policy changes, taking small steps towards complex changes. And Christian Aid have got a leaflet called 1 Million Ways. And that tells us to take steps to tread more lightly. I think that's a good catchphrase, isn't it? To tread more lightly and not leave such a big impact, and show our love for the world through changes in our own life. Remember that all your actions, big and small, make a difference. So there are just 3 things quickly. One of the big issues at the moment is moving money away from fossil fuels. I know often churches over the years are sort of maybe a bit reluctant to talk about financial things and financial decisions and where investments are going, but coal, oil and gas are unsustainable. They are hurting our earth and accelerating the warming of the world. So the shift to renewable energy is obviously well underway, but the pace needs to be quickened. People have the opportunity to help this, liberating millions of the world's poorest people already feeling the impact of climate change by leaving fossil fuels behind. So it says the way we can do this is by shifting our money and actions to a clean alternative energy. So for anybody who's, you know, the money that's coming from the big banks, a lot of the banks are financing lots of non-climate friendly activity, shall we say, and as part of that eco-church scheme, one of the main groups in there is to look at the church finances and where the church's bank account is held, where it invests, etc. So generally moving money away from fossil fuels is what they ask. And then Operation Noah, I don't know if you've heard of Operation Noah, they are running a Bright Now campaign, which is part of a growing global movement calling for divestment, which is the same thing as calling for churches to remove, to disinvest from companies that are involved in the extraction of fossil fuels, and to support the development of clean alternatives. Bright Now believe that by moving investments, churches would demonstrate the leadership that is largely missing from the political arena. They would offer hope by showing radical action can be taken and that the continued extraction of fossil fuel is no longer morally acceptable. I'm pretty sure, I should know exactly, but I don't, I'm pretty sure some of the main denominations, I think a lot of them have made announcements that they will be moving towards divesting investments. I'm not sure if it was the Church in Wales, and I think something has come from the Catholic Church as well. I've seen various announcements over the last sort of couple of months, couple of years about, you know, big sort of headquarters, for want of a better word, deciding that they would be doing that. So obviously that's that's really good. The last one there is just about United Nations have a World Environment Day. I should have checked when it is. I'm not sure when it is. What is it, May? I think it's already been this year. World Environment Day. It was just suggesting that could be a day where you kick-started, sort of use that as a goal in the calendar to kick-start some action and draw in other people from the outside and more communities as well. And trying to encourage people to consume with care, basically. So yes, it's about sort of being aware of the issues globally, how the things that we do here in a little corner of Wales can affect and have impact on a global scale. So I think the disinvestment and the disinvesting from fossil fuels is sort of big talking point there. That's all I had to say about the global campaigns. I'm sure there's a lot more that you all know about global campaigns, but anybody got any experience of, have you discussed it in your church? Is it something that you're all keen to do, or? No?
It's embarrassing that it's no, isn't it?
Yes, I think, as I said, traditionally, perhaps churches don't want to sort of, I'll say don't want to speak about money, because money is always an issue, that there's never enough of it to do things. But in terms of, poking your nose into where people are investing their money, it's always seen maybe of a private issue. I don't know, what do you think?
I think so. I think when you're trying to do something as a church, though, it does come down to money and the money that you can raise, because none of us can raise it from within our own communities. We're shrinking communities often. But you're quite right. It doesn't mean to say that it should go off the agenda simply because we can't afford it at this point in time. I find the schools are much more engaged with these things, and the younger generation is much more aware and active. I was listening to David Attenborough this morning, and he was saying how he feels that the children have absolutely got it because it's their future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just make a point that some of the issues we've been talking about are not necessarily as clear cut as we might think they are. For example, fossil fuels. The recent refusal of permission for a deep level mine in the north of England is going to impact on the steel industry, which needs the kind of fuel it was going to provide. And that fuel, coal, will now have to be imported from many, many hundreds or even thousands of miles away, with the environmental cost of that transport. So some of these issues are by no means as obvious as we might think they are. Sometimes a limited extraction for particular specific purposes may in fact be a better environmental option than the obvious.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I guess the counter argument would be that it should sort of only be renewable energy that we should be using now as much as possible, rather investing in, I mean, obviously it's better that coal would come locally rather than being imported, but it's sort of, why is there the need for that in the first place, But yeah, no, I take your point. There's definitely one key theme running through everything to do with sustainability and everything, and that is that it's never clear cut. For every time you have a conversation with somebody about something, they will come back with a counter argument or oh yes, but what about this and what about this? There's balances to be made and taken on nearly every decision, and it's certainly not black and white and not clear cut, nearly every aspect of sustainability. We've only got 5 minutes left. Let me see. The 3 bits left are how to engage with local sustainability groups, and I will literally just say 2 sentences about that because I think that is probably the easiest to deal with, in a sense of we have got an information sheet which we obviously printed for the event we did last year. As long as I make a note to myself, please feel free to email me and remind me if I haven't. We'll send out that information sheet, which, if I remember rightly, has got lots of sort of organisational contact points and Somebody was asking in the chat earlier about social farms and gardens. We'll have that information on there. But obviously, everybody, you know, in your own localities, the best place to start looking for local groups is contact your local community voluntary council. There's one in every county in Wales. And then get in touch with them and ask them for a list of who the various environmental groups are. If you're not aware, or do a quick web search. There'll be Friends of the Earth groups, RSPB groups, community gardens, I don't know, recycling groups, conservation things, renewable energy schemes. There'll be loads in every area that you can either get involved with supporting as a church, or perhaps individually, and just raising awareness of that. The other one is about involving with schools. And as you just said, Marion, you know, children already get it. And therefore, perhaps you could say that if you've got a local school, that's a really good opportunity to link with your school if you haven't already done it. I know Lacha Church here in Swansea, the 2 churches in Lacha, who were going to be one of our presentations today, but they weren't able to come. They've linked with their local school through the Terra Cycle scheme. So it's recycling sort of things like crisp packets, biscuit packets, toilet. I think they're just doing crisp packets and biscuit wrappers, but it's the things that you can't currently recycle. So they have got a huge amount of waste that would be going to landfill here in Swansea, now being collected by them, and they get, I don't know if it's 2 pence or 5 pence per bag or something. So it's raising money for the church, stopping stuff going to landfill, and they've got this really good relationship with the school whereby the children are collecting the items and bringing them over to them in the church to put in the recycling boxes that they have there. My notes here tell me basically that by opening up, for those of you who've got churchyards and grounds around you, it's not going to be relevant for everybody, but how it can link in with the curriculum. So in terms of plants and animals, you can get children sort of identifying different groups, comparing living and dead things. A bit dodgy in a graveyard, but anyway, I think they meant animals. Habitats, food chains, how changes to environments can cause problems, life cycle of plants, seasonal changes, you know, those kind of things. Then it mentions science skills and helping, encouraging, observing, recording scientifically, using equipment, recording results, etc. Humanities, sort of the sense of place, heritage and history changes over time. That's something perhaps you could get children involved in, your local history and heritage of the church. And then sort of in more of an art sense, either English, music and art, sort of just encouraging them to write a poem or draw pictures or make up songs that are all to do with nature and stuff. And just sort of, it's not going to be relevant to everybody. Some of you won't have any land outside, but it was just sort of a way of encouraging, you know, getting the children out to be doing different activities and how that can fit in with the curriculum. Oh my gosh. The last thing is how to twin your church. I know the bit I knew about was toilet twinning, because our toilet here, my mum bought me a toilet twinning for Christmas about 2 years ago. But in terms of just the church, never mind just the toilets, apparently the Church of England has been encouraging eco-twinning with part of the developing world for a number of years. And that's being promoted in parishes in England. Now, I don't know if any of you know whether that is actually actively promoted in the church in Wales as well. There's links with South Africa with the Diocese of York. So they twinned with Cape Town, False Bay and Saldanha Bay. And the purpose is to encourage each other, mutual concern, to help each other deal with the varying issues of climate change. In some cases, there have been exchange trips, but I don't think that's really going to happen very much anymore. So toilet twinning, 2.5 billion people don't have somewhere safe, clean and hygienic to go to the toilet. 2.5 billion. That's more than a third of the people on the planet, which I find absolutely bang out of order and really annoys me immensely. However, so yes, this toilet twinning has been invented, and I'm not sure exactly how the thing works, but look into it. If you Google toilet twinning, you can then sort of help people in poverty in different parts of the world who they can have access to a clean toilet, clean water, and other information that they need to be healthy. There are some examples of Deer Park Baptist Church in Tenby, Highfields Church in Cardiff, and what did I say? The Church in Wales and Monmouth Diocese have twinned toilets in Burundi in Africa. So yes, have a Google at toilet twinning and add that to the agenda and see if that's something that your church is keen to get involved in. Oh my gosh, okay. Are we being told, oh, yes, our breakout room is going to close in 52 seconds. So basically, I think we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we'll sort of, if we can just convene again back in the main room, and then we'll run on to the second round of workshops. So if anybody wants to grab a quick cup of coffee or nip to the toilet. If you need to leave at this point, feel free, that's absolutely fine. It's just we'll have a quick break because I'm conscious that people have been sitting down staring at a screen for a while, and then by clicking this, no, I think you leave automatically. If you do nothing, you will just be automatically put back in the main room. So see you at about 11:05. Thank you very much. Matt, I'm just literally nipping out for 5 minutes. I told people in our workshop that we'll reconvene 10 past at the latest, but preferably 11:05. We'll just have a quick 5-minute break so that we can stretch our legs, grab a cup of coffee and anything else we need to do.
Okay, great. I'll just get people set up for the next.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.